Well, you have promised a Kraken will be unleashed. We were expecting perhaps your suit would be filed yesterday or today. When shall we expect your lawsuit?
Well, I think no later than tomorrow. It's just going to be, it's a massive document, and it's going to have a lot of exhibits.
And who will be the defendant or defendants?
The defendants are going to be folks in Georgia who are responsible for supposedly making sure the elections in Georgia are done properly. And there are just countless incidents of voter fraud and election fraud writ large in Georgia.
In Georgia, are you planning any other suits beyond Georgia?
Yes, we are. We'll be rolling them out as fast as we possibly can because it affected the entire country, actually. We even have an affidavit now from a distant state that's done by one of the election officials in the state telling us all the things that person witnessed as being wrong there. So it was nationwide.
Well, the number of affidavits is voluminous now. The eyewitnesses are considerable. Your thoughts now about what will be the impact, and can it be adjudicated in such a way as to meet all of the deadlines that are forced upon you? That is December 8th, December 14th. Give us your sense of the timing and the urgency of getting this to resolution.
Yes, well, obviously it couldn't be more urgent. But yes, the time deadlines should be able to be met, and the evidence is so overwhelming, it's almost as though they were so blatant about it, they expected us to catch it, and, maybe it's a diversion from something else that's going on. I don't know, but it's also clear that there was foreign intrusion into our voting systems.
So now, Sidney Powell isn't only claiming fraud in one state, she isn't only claiming fraud in a few states, she's claiming nationwide fraud. And apparently, she's the only human being out of both parties that's actually seen the evidence proving this. Got it. She even says this: the evidence was so overwhelming, they were so blatant about it, that we expected them to catch it, and that maybe it's a diversion from something else that's going on. Meaning there's actually another conspiracy theory bigger than even this conspiracy theory. With this conspiracy theory, of course, being that China, Cuba, and Venezuela conspired together to deprive Donald Trump of a second term using a scheme devised by Hugo Chavez, who died in 2013, and includes the Republican Secretary of State and Governor of Georgia being in cahoots with Dominion voting systems to benefit from election insurance. Clearly those are a given, but we should totally keep our eyes open because there's something even beyond those things that's being covered up. And by the way, I'm not even being facetious. Those are literally her own words.
Here and uncovering more by the day is the massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China in the interference with our elections here in the United States. The Dominion voting systems, the Smartmatic technology software, and the software that goes in other computerized voting systems here as well, not just Dominion, were created in Venezuela at the direction of Hugo Chavez to make sure he never lost an election after one constitutional referendum came out the way he did not want it to come out. Georgia's probably going to be the first state I'm going to blow up, and Mr. Kemp and the Secretary of State need to go with it because they're in on the Dominion scam with their last-minute purchase or award of a contract to Dominion of $100 million. The State Bureau of Investigation for Georgia ought to be looking into the financial benefits received by Mr. Kemp and the Secretary of State's family about that time. And another benefit Dominion was created to award is what I would call election insurance. That's why Hugo Chavez had it created in the first place.
And bear in mind, we're talking about someone who proved too conspiratorial even for Rudy Giuliani. for Rudy Giuliani. He released a statement saying, quote, "Sidney Powell is practicing law on her own. She is not a member of the Trump legal team. She's also not a lawyer for the president in his personal capacity." The guy whose recent claim to fame was an off-the-rails press conference in a landscaping business alleyway between a sex shop and a crematorium, who had a box of hair dye leaked down his head, even he was like, yeah, she's not with us. Now, I just want to touch on the heart of Powell's so-called evidence, which is apparently a slew of affidavits. Only, despite what she's claiming here, affidavits are hardly the airtight evidence that she's making them out to be. First of all, the chances that sworn affidavits could subject the person who signed them to perjury charges is slim. Another issue is whether the affidavits were filed in court, which most by the Trump team have not been. Beyond that, any false statements would need to be deemed material, meaning relevant to the actual claims. And finally, any legal consequences would require that false statements made were knowingly false, which leaves a lot of wiggle room for declarants to say whatever they want, so long as they can claim that they believed what they were saying was the truth. In other words, while Powell points to these affidavits like they're some smoking gun, the facts don't actually back that up. And beyond all of that, consider too that the Trump campaign has a pretty bad track record when it comes to affidavits. Here's a Maricopa County courtroom where a judge dismantled the campaign for submitting affidavits that they themselves admitted came from a flawed process.
Your solicitation of witnesses yielded some affidavits from people, sworn affidavits, that you yourself determined are clearly false and spam, as you phrased it, correct?
That's correct.
The affidavits that you have submitted are the ones that you could not prove are false. So am I correct in saying you solicited affidavits, you received some you could prove were false, and you set those aside? The ones that you couldn't prove are false, you have submitted to the court.
Correct. They were submitted under penalty of perjury. Yeah.
But the affidavits that you yourself found to be false were also submitted under penalty of perjury, right?
Correct. Improperly.
The fact that your process for obtaining these affidavits yielded affidavits that you yourself found to be false does not support a finding that this process generates reliable evidence.
In other words, the Trump campaign is trying to claim that the process that produced spam affidavits was the same process that produced the affidavits that they submitted to the court, and yet they're somehow claiming that those are reliable. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. The fact is that the longer people like Sidney Powell keep this charade up, the more embarrassing it becomes. And it all stems from the fact that these people are such partisan hacks that they can't simply accept the fact that Donald Trump lost. And it's exactly this, the narcissism, the lies, the conspiracy theories that push so many people away from Trump in the first place. All this does is validate Americans' opposition to him. So they can keep propping up BS legal arguments and continue losing in the courts, but this isn't going to change the fact that Joe Biden will take office on January 20th, 2021, whether Trump leaves the White House on his own volition or if someone else does that for him. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.